At 9:15 a.m. on January 9, 2007, Mike Lazaridis stood beside a bank of monitors inside Research in Motion's Waterloo headquarters. Steve Jobs was on stage in San Francisco, pulling a glass rectangle from his pocket. Lazaridis watched the touchscreen demo, shook his head, and scoffed. Virtual keyboards are a definite compromise. That single sentence would erase $20 billion in market value and wipe out an empire. How did the engineers who invented the modern smartphone become completely blind to the future they created? An encrypted memo hidden in Waterloo, a hardware failure that blinded 80 million executives, and a boardroom betrayal that ended an industrial giant. Look at the phone sitting beside your desk right now. It receives notifications instantly without draining your battery, because in 1999, two men in Ontario solved mobile data compression. Mike Lazaridis was the technical genius. Jim Balsillie was the aggressive corporate hammer. Together, they built Research in Motion inside a modest office building in Waterloo, Ontario. In 1999, wireless networks were brutally slow. AT&T and Verizon throttled mobile bandwidth because cellular towers could not handle raw email data. Lazaridis designed a proprietary architecture. Instead of pulling data continuously, RIM servers compressed email before routing it through private infrastructure. The BlackBerry 850 was born. It ran on a single AA battery for 3 weeks. Wall Street took notice immediately. Corporate IT managers fell in love with the impenetrable security. Jim Balsillie signed enterprise deals with Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and the United States Congress. Do you realize how rare that was? Every major financial institution mandated that executives carry a BlackBerry. By 2004, RIM was printing cash. The company launched the BlackBerry 7200, introducing color screens and global roaming. Users developed a physical addiction to the red flashing LED light. They called it Crackberry. Inside RIM headquarters, engineering was treated like a religion. Every circuit was tuned to save network bytes. Telecom operators loved RIM because a BlackBerry used barely 1/10 of the bandwidth of a web page. By December 2006, RIM controlled over 20% of the worldwide smartphone market. Its stock reached an all-time peak, valuing the company at $26 billion. Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie felt indestructible. They had conquered the enterprise world and silenced every critic. In Waterloo, engineers tore apart an early iPhone demo, laughed at its logic board, and declared Steve Jobs was lying about battery life. Lazaridis told colleagues that AT&T's network would collapse if consumers actually used the iPhone for video streaming. He was technically correct, but he misunderstood human desire. Consumers did not care about battery life or bandwidth efficiency. They wanted a multi-touch browser, music, and full-color applications. If you want to understand how Titan companies collapse from within, Built and Broken exposes these hidden corporate blind sides every week. Hit subscribe right now to catch our deep dives before the rest of YouTube does. Jim Balsillie was distracted. Throughout 2007, he spent hundreds of hours trying to buy an NHL hockey franchise to relocate it to Hamilton, Ontario. While Apple was building an iOS software ecosystem, RIM's leadership was fractured, fighting regulators and hockey owners. Then Verizon delivered a brutal ultimatum to Waterloo: build a touchscreen device to crush Apple or get left behind. Verizon was furious that Apple had given exclusive US distribution of the iPhone to AT&T. They needed a weapon immediately. Lazaridis panicked. Instead of building a touch OS from scratch, His team tried to force a physical tactile feel onto a screen. They invented SureType, a mechanical click screen, where the entire glass display pressed down like a single physical key. It was an engineering nightmare. Water and dust seeped under the glass, causing keys to register twice or lock up completely. By December 2008, the BlackBerry storm launched. It recorded massive initial sales due to Verizon's multi-million-dollar marketing campaign. By December 2010, RIM was burning $2 million a day trying to patch legacy servers, while Apple swallowed 50% of corporate email accounts. Virtually every single one of the 1 million BlackBerry Storm units sold had to be replaced under warranty. Verizon demanded $500 million in restitution for damaged customer trust. Instead of cutting losses and switching to Android, Lazaridis doubled down on physical keyboard devices like the BlackBerry Bold 9000. The Bold 9000 was beautifully engineered with a genuine leather back and chrome bezels, but its browser was hopelessly outdated. In July 2008, Steve Jobs introduced the App Store. Developers flooded Apple with thousands of custom applications overnight. RIM tried to counter with BlackBerry App World, but its legacy C++ developer framework was brutally difficult to code for. An app developer took 3 days to write an application for iOS. That same application took 3 weeks to build for BlackBerry. Software developers abandoned Waterloo en masse. Inside RIM, senior engineers tried to sound the alarm. An anonymous memo titled "The Death of the Keyboard" reached top management. Lazaridis dismissed the memo. He truly believed corporate security officers would never allow iPhones onto secure enterprise networks. He was wrong. Employees began carrying 2 phones, a corporate BlackBerry for email and a personal iPhone for everything else. It was only a matter of time before corporate IT departments gave up and allowed workers to connect their personal iPhones. Then, in April 2010, Apple announced the iPad. Jim Balsillie rushed out a response device called the BlackBerry Playbook. The Playbook was launched in a state of sheer panic. When it shipped in April 2011, it did not even have a native email client. Think about that. The company whose sole identity was email shipped a tablet that could not check email without tethering to a phone. The Playbook flopped catastrophically. RIM took a massive $485 million write-down on unsold inventory sitting in warehouses. The cracks were turning into massive fissures. And then on October 10, 2011, the unthinkable happened. At a master network operations center in Slough, England, a core network switch failed. The redundant backup switch failed to ignite. Millions of emails backed up instantaneously, cascading through global servers. For 4 full days, 80 million subscribers worldwide woke up to total blackout. BlackBerry Messenger went dark. Investment bankers could not trade. Politicians could not communicate. For years, RIM had argued that its centralized infrastructure was its greatest asset. In 4 days, it proved to be a single catastrophic point of failure. Mike Lazaridis recorded a video apology. He looked exhausted, reading off a teleprompter with pale, sunken eyes. The damage was irreparable. Enterprise IT directors began immediately migrating corporate contracts to Apple. Listen to how this human catastrophe felt from the inside.
This is what a former RIM software engineer told journalists after his division was liquidated.
On January 22, 2012, under intense pressure from institutional shareholders, Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie stepped down as co-CEOs. The board appointed Thorsten Heinz as new CEO. Heinz was an insider who promised rapid transformation. On his first day, Hines told reporters, "There is no drastic change needed." The stock crashed another 15% before market close. Hines bet everything on a completely new operating system built on QNX microkernel technology, BlackBerry 10. Engineers worked 80-hour weeks in Waterloo to rewrite the entire OS codebase. Launch deadlines were delayed from early 2012 to late 2012, then pushed to early 2013. During those 12 months of delay, Apple sold 125 million iPhones. Samsung sold over 200 million Android smartphones. RIM's market share eroded to almost zero. On January 30, 2013, Thorsten Hines stepped onto a stage in New York City. He officially renamed the company BlackBerry and revealed the Z10 touchscreen phone. The Z10 was fluid and modern. It featured gesture navigation that was years ahead of Android. Climax. When users opened the BlackBerry World Store, Instagram was missing. Netflix was missing. WhatsApp announced it would end support. Consumers refused to purchase a smartphone without native apps. Retailers were left holding mountains of unsold Z10 units. On August 12, 2013, BlackBerry's board quietly hung a for sale tag on an empire once valued at $83 billion. They signed a tentative buyout agreement with Fairfax Financial for just $7 billion. The deal collapsed when banks refused to finance the loan. Thorsten Hines was fired. In September 2013, BlackBerry laid off 500 employees in a single morning, 40% of its remaining global workforce. New CEO John Chen took over the wreckage. Chen made a ruthless decision: kill internal smartphone design entirely. BlackBerry licensed its brand name to Chinese manufacturer TCL, which released a few budget Android devices with physical keyboards. Nobody bought them. By December 2016, BlackBerry's global smartphone market share was officially recorded as 0%. On January 4, 2022, BlackBerry officially decommissioned legacy servers for BlackBerry OS and BBM. Millions of vintage devices instantly turned into plastic paperweights. Where are the founders today? Mike Lazaridis walked away with hundreds of millions, living quietly in Waterloo and founding quantum research institutes. Jim Balsillie manages private equity funds, lecturing on corporate governance at international business schools. BlackBerry itself still exists as a cybersecurity software firm, but its role as the hardware king of mobile communications is permanently dead. The story of research in motion was not killed by a lack of genius, technical talent, or capital. It was killed by executive arrogance, internal warfare, and an absolute refusal to acknowledge that consumer culture had shifted. Mike Lazaridis refused to accept a definite compromise, and that single sentence cost his company $20 billion. If you want to understand how empires fall before the headlines catch up, hit subscribe and join Built and Broken for our next deep dive. Next time, the $125 billion suicide. Subscribe, you do not want to miss it.